Hello there. Last week we published the first episode on handing over legacy projects. Today, please welcome the second part of the episode. Have you been ever dealing with a legacy project, like a commercial project that has been already taken over, where from day one you have been handling some very, very tough, difficult issues, something critical, something security related, something that could burn the entire business and put it into disgrace? Have you been ever dealing with such situation?
Unfortunately, yes. And this is like the common thing. Like changing vendor, software vendor is very painful process. So usually the company can like tries to postpone that uh, as far as possible. And you very often when company enters our door, uh, it's already quite severe.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've worked with software project that had security issues very critical from the day one, and there's like huge amount of pressure to fix them. But on the other hand, you still have limited knowledge about the system, so you need to make sure that you're confident enough to deploy and to fix those changes, and you're not going to jeopardize the interest of the company even more. So yeah, it happens, and you need to be very careful in cases like this.
All right, and Krzysztof?
Yeah, I mean, I have this one interesting example of a system that I already mentioned of a central admin in an e-commerce company that was developed as the first and main system and then spread throughout the company, used in all of the departments to have an overview of static customer and transactional data. And the main stakeholder became the customer care with like hundreds of agents using it on a daily basis. So the problems that we are facing were really like random and unknown downtimes.
Mhm.
And literally, it took the team that was already changing the system and maintaining the system a couple of good sprints and
Mhm.
additional experts from the company to identify the root cause of the issue. And in the end, it did not require really code changes. The problems were located within the DevOps and container load balancing area of the app. Uh, but the lesson learned from this for me was that the human factor is super important
Mhm.
uh, because there was like really strong unwillingness from the development team to work with this legacy stack. So what
Okay.
I would hear as a product owner those days was like, "Hey, let's rewrite it. We don't understand it. It doesn't make sense."
Mhm.
Yeah, we tried a couple of times already. It did not work. So this was the main thing to overcome, to really fix
Mhm.
it and make it stable, because transitioning from this legacy project would be anyways many years endeavor. So that's one thing. Like many times, the development teams keep a blind eye on the business goals of what they're maintaining and just look at this legacy system from a technology perspective. But yeah, we succeeded, so everything is possible.
So development teams often complain about the lack of documentation of projects that are handed over. Uh, do you have, let's say, some types of assets that you appreciate the most, like, I don't know, diagrams and so on? What is useful to take over a project, especially if the assets standing behind it are limited?
I would probably repeat myself and say that documentation of the parts that are not included into the code base is crucial, just because code base by itself is quite good documentation, because at the end of the day you've got quite concrete explanation of how things work. maybe it's not that easy to understand, but if you've got like enough time, you can go through the code base and understand how it works. What is usually critical is things that are not so-called managed dependencies. So we have got those systems and we don't have access to the code base, and nobody knows how they work. And any documentation on that part usually is like very welcome. So this is the one thing. In like maybe not such severe cases, like architectural diagrams and infrastructure diagrams and some test cases are like very important, because you can understand how the system works, how to deploy that system, and how this system is composed. So maybe you can ask further questions. Especially, I would consider test cases very helpful, but still you need to like have in the back of your head that they may be not full, and there might be some areas that are not covered by the documentation you've got. So you need to limit your trust when dealing with such documentation as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always outdated. Never perfect. I would even lower the bar. It's always highly incomplete, even with fresh projects. Like customers come to us with 10 months year old code base, and they have something, but in the end, it's usually, it helps a bit to kind of start into the project, but really does not answer majority of the questions. I will just add one more artifact, which is architecture decision record that is really so nice to have if you can understand based on that the history of the decisions being made and why certain things work the way they do, because it's often easy to jump into conclusions. Hey, they use this or that, or it doesn't make sense. But if you understand the context and the history, I think it always helps, and also kind of allows to not to make the same mistakes and not to fix things that are like dead ends. So again, that's something I rarely see, and we offer this creating architecture decision record as an extra kind of documentation entity. But I think this is super helpful, unless you have people that are willing to work with you and clarify. But again, changing the vendor, legacy system, people are gone or really not contracted anymore.
Yeah, and I would say that there's a survivor bias, like the reverse version of a survivor bias. So usually when someone wants to change the vendor, this is because they didn't have proper documentation. So when they struggle with the internal rotation, the new team members couldn't like learn and onboard fast enough. So you'll end up with a situation where you won't be able to find those documents. If you were, probably the need of replacing the vendor wouldn't exist in the first place. So this is very often the case, I would say.
Yeah, I mean,
Alright.
sometimes even people realize, like product owners or stakeholders, I don't know what this system is really doing. Like, I'm not sure about this or that. There's no documentation. So much time passed by, and what we start with is like a test plan, a regression test suite, and all of this stuff that are missing. So yeah, totally agree.
Thank you. So legacy projects are usually associated with a great amount of resources that are already burnt. And by saying resources, we mean money, but also hours, and also thing that we do not like called resources, but means people. Yeah. And usually when such project is approaching us, or stakeholders of such projects are approaching us, they are already tired. Their resources may be limited. They might be, let's say, exhausted already because of the project that consumed so much time and so many resources. What can we do to help people in such situation? How can we help organizations that already burned a lot to build a project, to build, for example, a product that doesn't work yet?
So I'm a huge proponent of evidence-based product ownership. So it means that before we are going to do something, let's create a hypothesis. What are we going to achieve? How are we going to measure? Maybe we want to introduce the measurement before we are going to implement anything, and then make sure that we've reached our goals. First of all, we're going to gain some trust from the stakeholders that might be discouraged to continue the project in general, even. So I think trust is the most important issue, and the best way to regain trust is to make sure that your goals are transparent and they're met. So that would be my approach, and obviously it depends, like case by case, what the goals should be. But measuring what matters is the most important part, and tracking the progress.
Okay.
I would just add, really reflecting on what was the history of the development, and stop pouring money into a leaky bucket, because as you kind of ask the question, it's often the case that you put more and more into a legacy system and you really have diminishing results. And understanding why, I think it's key, because there are so many strategies that can be employed, that this time is really good invested before jumping and changing or rewriting or whatever. So that's a big money saver potentially.
All right then. Gentlemen, one of my last questions. Thank you again. One of my last questions today may even sound stupid, but people ask this question, and I think that it's good to, let's say, give a little bit of overview to the public. If we are taking over a legacy project and we know that refactoring or even replatforming will be required, where we should start? Shall we start with the back end? Shall we start with the front end? Shall we, I don't know, work a little bit on the UI, on the security? What do you think? What is the good starting point in a legacy project?
I would say that ROI is the most important metric that I would focus on. So it obviously depends on the current issues. Maybe we've got a platform where we waste tremendous amount of money just because of poor click-through rate, and the customer acquisition is like very high. And fixing this would actually solve the issue. So it would be UX, UI based, maybe even copy can change the way users operate. But it may be that the same users don't want to sign in to the platform just because it's so the performance is so low that they are discouraged to use the platform. And you can learn in the data that, for instance, in e-commerce platform, every 50 milliseconds of the delay will decrease the amount of items that you're going to sell. So still, it might be backend oriented, it may be UI oriented, it may be front-end oriented. The ROI is the most important factor to consider, and you need to work very closely with the product owners to understand the whole picture.
Yeah, I would say don't ask this question an engineer, because then, depending on what kind of engineer you ask, you will get one of these answers. Like, you ask it a React developer, and if he sees like, I don't know, Vue UI or whatever, he say, hey, let's refactor front end, and the situation goes on. So definitely go to the business or a product owner person, and then work from there with the proper engineers, depending on the area that is in the spotlight.
Yeah, don't treat everything as a nail just because you are a hammer.
All right, then. Thank you very much. One last question, and let's eventually try to make it short. However, this is going to be a tough one. Sometimes we need to deal as a software vendor with a, I would say, divorce situation where we are taking over a project from a previous vendor, and obviously the previous vendor is unhappy with that situation. What can we do? What are the good practices to make it happen, like in a gentle way, in a smooth way, without any obstruction and any sacrifice coming from the client?
I would say don't depend too much on them. Like make sure that you can reach your goals even if the cooperation is a bit rough. So this is one thing, and like a bit of diplomacy is never a bad thing, I would say. So even if like the code is rubbish, it doesn't mean that they didn't do their best. So like be kind and be nice. I would say be aware that they may don't know how the system works. Maybe they work in the company for a short time, so this is still something that you need to consider. And I would say that it's very important to create transparent transition plan and responsibilities before the actual transition is going to happen. A very important part that needs to be considered as well are all of the manual process that the current team is do on the daily basis. Very often those processes, they are not documented, they are not included into the code base, but somehow they are important to maintain the system, and this is very important to retrieve this information from the current vendor, because you won't be able to find it anywhere else.
Gentlemen, I think this was a good interview. It was a very insightful one. I hope that the people who are watching us will get something for themselves, some words of advice, something that they can use in their professional work. Obviously, we encourage our viewers to ask questions. You can drop us a line via email, on LinkedIn, using our social media. Feel free to drop comments. We are super happy to provide encourage and to provide knowledge on the topics that are important to you. This was Merixstudio It's Time to Talk show. My name is Mike Lisewski. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.